Hello YouTube, welcome back to Kind Heart Homestead. My name is Ben and I'm standing outside of our garden fence here, ready to dispatch our birds. You can see in the background I have our chicken tractor. It's about as close as we can get to our little dispatch station. This is going to be a multi-part series and this is episode 2. So if you haven't seen episode 1, I recommend you go back and watch that because it's going to explain our setup a bit better and about what the different pieces of equipment are for. The only difference that I've done so far today is I put up that tarp, and it's kind of dreary, misty, and rainy today. That tarp might help keep our setup dry, but the real point of it is to provide a blind so that these birds can't see what's happening to their comrades in here. I don't know if that is a science-based thing, but I do know that you're supposed to reduce the stress as much as possible for meat birds because added stress can contribute to tougher meat. And I don't know if that's a short-term thing or a long-term thing. I don't know if they have to live in a stressful environment day after day to develop that tough meat, or if one day of stress is enough. Either way, I had this tarp just sitting in my trunk so I can throw stuff in there without getting my trunk dirty. So I just set it up real quick, no big deal. And I also moved the cooler out here. I'm probably going to set up my GoPro here and do a time-lapse real quick because the first step is to sterilize all the equipment with bleach. So I'm going to do that now, get all my knives and cutting tools out on that table, and then we'll see where we can get from there. So stick around if you want to see more about chicken dispatching. All right, I'm almost ready to get started. I sprayed out some of these buckets with bleach. Not sure if that's necessary because I think they're just going to be for blood and guts. But just in case we want to store some of the chicken necks and chicken feet in there for our own consumption, we would probably need a sterilized bucket. I sterilized that table as well as the knives and kitchen shears that we're going to be using. I sterilized this. It's kind of tricky to do. Let me show you. There's a bunch of fingers in here. And we've never used this, so I don't really know how dirty it could be. But I'm not going to concern myself too much with that. I have the pot sterilized and I have a thermometer clipped onto the edge. So once I fire that up, I can get to the optimum temperature, which I believe is somewhere between 145 to 150 degrees for scalding. The birds back there are staged. We have a wagon over there next to the chicken coop. Angie was able to corral most of the roosters from that flock that we're going to dispatch. I think we're going to start off by dispatching those birds because those ones are a bit more independent. They're not used to being without food. They're used to free ranging, and I don't want to let them be uncomfortable for too long. So all I have to do now is finish filling this cooler so I can get ice in it and try to get that water up to the proper temperature. And then I'm going to try out this kill cone for the first time, and we'll see how it goes. I know this is not going to be a pleasant experience. All the homesteaders claim that, yes, they're doing this out of necessity for their food, for their family, but no one really enjoys killing animals. So we're going to use the term dispatch, which is a bit more of a politically correct term, but it means the same thing. We're going to kill these birds, but we made sure to give them as happy and as peaceful of a life as possible, while also feeding them the most nutritious organic feed we can find. We actually make ours ourselves. For the 17% mix, you can go watch a YouTube video on that. But anyway, let's get into it. This giant cooler might barely be big enough to temporarily hold all of the birds after we process them, but we need to keep the temperature as low as possible, which is why I'm filling this halfway with ice water. I'm only going halfway because the birds will displace the water if I fill it too high. The next step is to light the burner for our scalding pot. This is a nice, large stainless steel pot. This burner cooks so hot that it's going to take no time at all to get to the proper temperature. Here's a buff Orpington rooster and 2 speckled Sussex roosters that we're also going to dispatch. I think there's a couple more running around that we have to catch later. But we're going to start with the Buff Orpington. This is the one that's attacked Cedar a few times, and we just really need to get rid of it. But also, we just have too many roosters anyway, and we only want to save 1 or 2 because we want to maintain a suitable ratio of roosters to hens to keep the hens safe and to keep our family safe as well. So I should have said from the start that this is going to be a very long, drawn-out video because I want to show you our first impressions and experiences dispatching and processing these birds. For the first few rounds, I'm going to try to keep the video footage at the normal rate of speed. Usually I at least double the speed or do time lapses just to kind of make the videos a lot quicker to watch. But in this case, I'm assuming the people that are watching this either have experience and want to help us out, or they've never done this before and they want to see how we do it. The dispatching here of the first bird is pretty emotional. This bird wasn't raised for meat, it was raised as a pet, and I did get to know him, even though he's kind of mean. So I'm just kind of thanking him for protecting his hens and living with us on our homestead before I cut the artery. And for purposes of YouTube, I'm going to blur out the actual cutting part. And if you want to see that, you should reach out to us either in the comments or through our email address. You might be able to find that through YouTube. But we're not allowed to show the actual harm done to the animals because of the terms of service of YouTube. Anyway, as you can see here, the first cut didn't actually do anything because the feathers were in the way. I had forgotten to kind of comb the feathers down, kind of part them like you would hair, to get the knife down there on the actual skin. And in this part of the process, you can't be afraid, you can't be delicate. For the sake of the bird and for the sake of getting this done quickly, you need to make a very deep incision along the side of the neck, as close to the head as you comfortably can without hitting your fingers. And you also want to go a bit towards the front of the neck, but not all the way to the front because you don't want to hit the windpipe or the esophagus. Basically, you need this bird to live, have its heart continuing to pump, and then the blood will drain faster because of the blood pumping. I believe another extra step to make this a bit more humane is to stun the bird first. That would involve either hitting it really hard with some sort of tool or stunning it with an electrical tool. I'm kind of interested in the electrical option. I think there's a product called an electric chicken stunner. And that would make this part a bit less emotional. I'm sure we'll get used to it eventually. But one of our goals is to reduce suffering because these animals were our friends. We raised them from chicks, and we just want to make sure they've had a great life. Otherwise, there's not really much of a point of this. So anyway, back to the process at hand. You saw that the bird started kicking. That was not conscious. That was due to the lack of blood pumping through its veins. And you could see I tried to keep the blur a bit up from the bottom so you could see the blood coming down into the bucket. I hope that doesn't violate the terms of YouTube, but we will see what happens after I upload this. I just want to show as much of the process as possible. Anyway, after the kicking and twitching stops, I have to continue the cut around the other 3 sides of the neck. I considered there to be like front, back, left, and right, and I tried to do 4 cuts to connect the incision all the way around. Then finally cut the windpipe and any other connective tissue that's there. This bird is dead. I'm not torturing it by making a bunch of these cuts. This is just the first one as I kind of warm up and get more used to the process. You can see there's not a lot of blood, and I'm just off screen there looking for another knife. Angie has this old knife that I think is for probably skinning deer or something, and the reason I'm switching knives is because bones will dull the heck out of a knife almost instantly, and we need to keep that knife sharp for the rest of the day, and I don't want to keep sharpening it. So if we have one knife dedicated to cutting the head off, which is the most bone-oriented cut that we have to do, then that's going to keep our knife the sharpest. So a few firm slices and the head gets removed and dropped straight down into the bucket below. All right, here's an update because I'm taking a break. The first bird is done. There was pretty minimal bleeding before I removed the head. I don't really know how to explain that. when I participated in a workshop last year, there was a lot of blood. So maybe that's because this isn't a meat bird and it has a lot more muscle. I don't know. But the reason I'm taking a break is because my temperature here, it was in the 180s on the thermometer. And it only needs to be like 150 degrees. So now I have to wait for it to cool down so I can scald this bird and pluck it. Let's see if this thing even works.
I know.
Their legs might be too big.
This process is called scalding the bird.
Because they had a huge one at a workshop.
The meat birds are going to have even bigger legs than
I
this.
know.
And the purpose of this is to loosen the feathers so the plucker can do its job.
Is that pot even big enough? 2, 3. Uh-oh. That'll get some water out.
This is our first time doing this, so we obviously need some more practice to make it more efficient. But I think we're going to abandon using this potato masher, at least for this year. But we'll probably keep it nearby because it might come in handy if we have to push the bird down so we don't have to worry about burning our hands. Yeah. So I'm trying to keep the dialogue between me and Angie in the video so you can really understand our first impressions, our confusion, our frustrations, anything I'm explaining to Angie because she didn't actually participate in the workshop. Anyway, what I'm holding here is a potato masher. I ordered one because the homesteaders that hosted the chicken processing workshop 1 year ago had one, and they used it to clip onto the feet and hold the bird. But what we found out was that potato mashers must come in different sizes because this one is barely big enough to even hold the legs of this young egg bird, and it's definitely not going to hold the giant legs of our meat birds. So we'll probably just use this for maybe ground beef or mashing potatoes, and if we want to try to perfect this process, we could order a larger potato masher. We'll probably stick with the stainless steel. I try to make sure there's as few of seams and moving parts as possible to make it easier to clean and sterilize. But what we're doing here is using that ideal temperature. We're dunking the bird for only 3 to 4 seconds at a time, and I'm really pushing it up and down to allow the water to get between the feathers. And Angie is testing some of the largest feathers, which would be the wingtip feathers or the tail feathers. And once those come out pretty easily with a firm tug, you know it's ready to go straight into the plucker. We just repeat the dunk until it's ready. Now on to the plucker. I know there's still some homesteaders out there that like to pluck by hand, but I knew that I didn't want to do that, and to make it as easy as possible for me to be interested in even starting this process, I wanted to at least have the proper equipment. This is a Yardbird Plucker. It's the new model that came out about 1 year ago, and I do have an unboxing video on our Kind Heart Homestead YouTube channel that shows how I took it out of the box, first impressions. There's some assembly in there, but I didn't really do a full assembly in the video. But the only thing missing was a demonstration. So if you're coming back here after watching that video, then this is your chance to see how it performs in action. This is the first bird we've ever placed in it. You're seeing the first impressions live as we've seen it at the actual speed. You can see we have a hose splitter that Yardbird was nice enough to include in the box, and that allows us to have a hose nearby that we can use to clean off our equipment, clean out the birds, and then we can also keep the hose attached to this machine as well. Because as you can see, you can't really use the machine without running the water through it. At least it's probably not going to work very well if there's no water, because I think the water is what adds weight to the feathers and sends it down through the chute. And as you can see underneath the machine, barely, there's a bit of a blue piece of plastic in the frame. That is a Pepsi crate. It looks kind of like an elongated version of a traditional milk crate. And every 5 birds or so, that basket fills up and we go and we dump it in the compost. And as you can see here, I am trying to hose the feathers down. And going forward, I'm not going to do this after every bird, but because I don't really know exactly how much feather buildup this machine can handle, I'm going to clean it off until I get a better feel for the machine. So before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's go back to the kill cone, dispatch one more bird, get it plucked, and then we'll have 2 fresh plucked birds for a demonstration.
Hey. I'm sorry. I don't know how to flip you over correctly. Maybe if I hold you from the feet? No. Hey. This is the hard part. Sorry, baby.
Okay, thank you for giving us food.
Can you hold it in there? I have to do it with a knife. And then I have to stand exactly where you're standing. Okay. Oh, did I put it in backwards?
I don't know what it's supposed to be.
Well, I just don't... The shape of the thing. I think is the breast the round part of the bird? That should be on this side.
Should we turn it around?
No, let's give it a try this way.
Okay.
I'm sorry, bird.
Thank you.
They say you should have it facing you anyway.
Yeah.
So this is the tricky part. The knife will not cut through these feathers.
Okay.
So you need to separate them.
Yeah.
What I'm doing is putting my thumb around the feathers.
Yeah.
So I can expose the skin.
Yeah.
You don't want to hit the windpipe. They say you should do both sides, but I think one... Hey. I'm sorry. I don't know how to flip you over correctly. Maybe if I hold you from the feet? No. Hey. This is the hard part. Sorry, baby.
Okay, thank you for giving us food.
Can you hold it in there? I have to do it with a knife. And then I have to stand exactly where you're standing. Okay. Oh, did I put it in backwards?
I don't know what it's supposed to be.
Well, I just don't... The shape of the thing. I think is the breast the round part of the bird? That should be on this side.
Should we turn it around?
No, let's give it a try this way.
Okay.
I'm sorry, bird.
Thank you.
They say you should have it facing you anyway.
Yeah.
So this is the tricky part. The knife will not cut through these feathers.
Okay.
So you need to separate them.
Yeah.
What I'm doing is putting my thumb around the feathers.
Yeah.
So I can expose the skin.
Yeah.
You don't want to hit the windpipe. They say you should do both sides, but I think one side is probably good enough.
Okay.
And then you just have to go really hard. But you also really need to watch out for your skin.
Yeah.
So I think I'm gonna redo this feather thing. Go a bit up higher towards this metal and farther from my finger.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna turn them a bit so I don't hit that windpipe. Because when I go, the knife's kind of at an angle. That's a clean cut. Much better than the Orpington. No convulsing. I can never tell if I'm being too rough with them getting to this phase. Like, I need to hold them firm to keep the neck and the feathers separated so I can get a clean cut. And if I skip that part, then it's not going to be a clean cut, and I feel like that's even less comfortable. Anyway, the reason I'm holding on so long is because once this blood stops pumping, it's going to convulse. And it can pull its head back up through.
Mm-hmm.
And, yep. Thankfully, they folded this metal over here,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm not too much at risk of getting cut.
Yeah.
So as you probably overheard, this was a very clean cut. It worked a lot better than it did on the buff Orpington. But that's what practice does. The more you do it, the better you get. And as you can see here, we're not really struggling because Angie's holding the feet.
So with the back of the knife, I'm going to part out this side. I'm still trying to keep pressure because I don't want that bird to get out of here.
I'm holding its legs too.
Okay.
Now I repeat the incision on the other side of the neck.
I sharpened this after Orpington. I figured it came sharp enough from the factory, but after the feather fiasco, All right. Just felt him breathe one more time. Thank you, bird. We're going to live because of you.
I feel like it's only appropriate to thank the bird for sacrificing itself to feed my family, but your philosophy might vary.
Orpington, go away, please. Oh, here he goes. Sorry, Orp. You're losing some friends, but I think you're gonna have more peace.
They, I didn't feed him because I've been trying to not feed the roosters. They're looking for food. But it might just end up being that we have 2 roosters because I can't get that barred locked.
Yeah, this is way more blood than Orpington. I wish the heads wouldn't look like chickens, but we just have to get used to it.
Yeah. I thought you weren't supposed to video this part, or you weren't supposed to show it on YouTube.
Can't publish it on YouTube. I'll probably not record all of it like that. I'll probably do time lapse for the rest, or maybe I'll do one more with a meat bird, so I have like a good example of each.
Yeah.
I had to redo it because I felt like when I did Orpington, it wasn't good.
Right.
Okay, he's like still alive.
I thought at what point do you sever the head?
I could do it now, but it keeps moving, and I have to switch knives because I don't want to dull this one on the bones. Is that him or you?
That's him.
Okay,
I'm just holding his feet.
that must be the end. I mean, I cut his artery on both sides. How is he still?
It's just muscle memory. They don't necessarily, their brains aren't necessarily telling their muscles what to do. I'm gonna hold him, and then you can go get the knife.
No, I'd rather you just go get the knife. I don't want to let go. You can set this one over there. So you kind of need to find the spot you've already cut, and then you can continue the cut through the skin all the way around. And then once there's no skin left and you can see everything, you pull really hard. You chop between.
Are you leaving very dripping? Or?
Oops. Yeah, let's leave him. But I forgot to turn the heater back on.
Oh.
We still have a lot of streamlining to do, but as you can see here, we're repeating the process where after severing the head, we put it in the scalding water at the ideal temperature, and we try to bob the bird up and down for 3 to 4 seconds each time, and then we repeat that dunking process for as many times as it takes to easily remove a tail feather or a wing feather. Basically, any of the large feathers are good tests, and there's no real rule of thumb for how many times you need to do this. You just need to keep trying out the feather until it's loose. But you cannot keep the bird down there longer than 4 seconds because you can risk cooking the skin. And maybe that's not a big deal if you're going to skin the bird, but for us, we want the skin intact. And once again, it's on to the plucker. We're just going to throw the bird in there, run it for as long as it takes to get probably like 99% of the feathers off. And I don't really have anything else to say, so let's just turn it on. So as you can see here, we turned off the machine while there were still plenty of feathers left, probably about 15 to 20% feather coverage still on here, and they're not coming off. I think that's because Angie probably didn't shake the bird while she was dunking it to get that hot water down into all the little pockets of the skin. So we're just going to go repeat the process a couple more times, see if those feathers can loosen, and then put it back in the plucker.
There we go. I might just have to hand pluck.
So originally I was going to leave this as true speed so you can really get a feel for how long this takes. But I didn't think this was a good example because for this bird I'm explaining to Angie how to do it since she's never done it before. So right before publishing this video I went back, switched this to 800 times speed because later in this video I'm actually going to walk you through the steps of the process, and I actually spoke to the microphone while recording. So I don't actually have to do a voiceover of the steps. You'll be able to watch it live. So stay tuned for that a bit later in this video. But for now, this is just a slow, drawn-out process because we have to really lock in what we're doing, make sure we both understand our roles and responsibilities. And then that way I can do my part and Angie can do her part.
All right, everyone, let me show you our status so far. We have 4 of our egg flock roosters in this cooler of chilled water. It was supposed to be much colder than that, but all the ice melted. But thankfully, our well water stays pretty chilled. Angie's handling the 5th one. And we have a pretty good routine going. I'm doing the dispatching, the removing of the head, and the scalding and the plucker. And then Angie's doing the gutting, the rinsing, and the removing of the feet, and then submerging all of that into the chilled water. One of our egg roosters got away out of the cage, so we might have to go find him when we take a break for lunch. But it's really not that big of a deal. He's not one that we purchased for the purpose of meat. But since we have too many roosters, it's a good idea to cull the excess. So I'm taking a short break now just to explain the status, because now I think I'm going to set up a time lapse to start working on the meat birds. We haven't touched them yet. One of them has an injured leg, so I think I want to go ahead and get him done first because we just want to reduce suffering as much as we can. And a couple hours less of having a hurt leg seems like a good idea to me. So we're going to get started on that, work for probably 1 hour, turn the cameras off, clean up for lunch, and then get back to it. So I'll reconvene during our lunch break. All right, everyone. I'm inside for lunch. I have the Instapot running. You might hear that in the background. Cooking some chicken nuggets that we had in the freezer. Just trying to free up some freezer space for these birds. Anyway, as I suspected it would be, it's a bit more draining than I thought. Everything is, though. Everything about homesteading is always more difficult than you think it would be. I dispatched 2 or 3 birds last fall at a workshop up here on top of the mountain that another homesteader hosted not too far from us. And that was definitely draining, but at least I had a lot of downtime because I was watching other people do it. There was food served, all sorts of stuff. Here, I haven't slept well in several nights. It's also raining outside, so it's kind of gloomy and cold and windy. Thankfully, I have Angie to help me, but she needs to go in about 2 hours to pick up Cedar. So we're going to try to knock out as much as we can, maybe save the bagging for after school. Oh yeah, one more thing before I sign off for lunch. So the first meat bird that we processed was a lot more difficult than those egg roosters. I think it's because the feathers are so small on the neck that I can't really part them like this to get down to the skin. So it was really rough trying to bleed out that first meat bird. I hope it didn't suffer more, but it was tough, and it ended up jumping out of the cone with its head cut off. We learned our lesson there, and I think for the next few meat birds, we're going to do 2 people at the kill cone just to see if we can streamline it a bit more. But besides that, our system seems to be working pretty well. The first thing I like to do is cut off the chicken feet. I recommend using a sacrificial knife for this because it's all steel on bone. All you have to do is put some pressure bending the joint backwards to open the front of the joint, and then just kind of score around it. Once all the skin is off, you can break the leg and then just cut whatever tendons are holding it together. This one actually got disrupted in the plucker. It broke, but that actually makes it easier for me. I probably need to go back and sharpen my knives, but I feel like it's better to not dull your knife that you use for killing on the bones. What I do use that knife for is anywhere where I know I'm not going to hit any bones, like the edges of the cavities. So right here in the front, I can open up that cavity. Similarly, right here on the back. And then after that, I can switch to my stainless poultry shears. These are slightly serrated, and they're really good at opening this stuff up. But before I start cutting more, I kind of want to reach in, pull the neck through this hole here. This is the esophagus, and I like to make sure that's nice and loose because I might be pulling it through the other end. So now that that's done, oops, got some poop on me. I'm gonna go clean that off. So that's the vent where the poop just came out. We don't want that contaminating the meat. So anytime that comes out, I like to clean it up. But usually we don't have that problem because we didn't feed them. But they also digest over time and they eat grass and things like that. But what you want to do is avoid getting any of those stomach contents and bile into the meat. It's okay if it gets on the table as long as you clean it up. So I need to open this a bit more because I have to reach my hand in here. And then this one was a hen, so it's actually smaller. Here's a bunch of fat around what I believe is the gizzard. So I'm trying to be careful because I want to dislodge everything, but I don't want to break anything. So I'm reaching around the contents, around the edge of the cavity, and I'm trying to separate anywhere where there's resistance, any sort of connective tissue that's holding it to the cavity. I'm trying to loosen up, hook my fingers around, and then pull it out. This is the crop where their latest meal will be held. And you can see I was able to get all of this out at once. There is some poop coming out. So if you noticed, that first incision was at least an inch above the vent. And that's because any poop that's coming out, I want to make sure it comes out of the bird and not into the bird. And you also don't want to cut any of this on the inside. You can see how this whole system is dangling over. Well, I haven't cut that yet. Let me get some of this fat out of here. That's kind of a weird example because of the poop. We haven't had this issue with any of the other birds. I am going to hose all that off, but I'm trying to keep my tools as clean as possible. So, I'll show you how I deal with the vent. I like to go down vertical on each side of the vent. You can salvage a lot of this by going close to the vent, but on this bird it's all fat, so I'm just cutting it all out. So I'm cutting it vertically because the vent is still down there. And then I can cut below the vent, just above the tail. The vent is right there, self-contained, with all of this. None of that poop got inside of the bird. So you notice all of that came out, but there's still some organs in there. Here's the heart. And then here's the rest of that esophagus. There's still some fat in there, but that's okay. I'll grab some of this loose stuff, though. There's no testes, because this is a hen. Now all that's left is the neck. So if I score all sides of the neck, all it takes is a firm crack to break it off. I'll throw that in with the heart, and we're going to chill those and make broth out of them later. So now all I have to do is go rinse this out, and I'm going to put it in the cooler. I'm going to try to clean off this work surface just a bit because of the poop incident. Now for the next one. So let's make the incision above the vent. Oh, this bird's really fatty. And then, just above the neck, I like to turn that inside out, get that throat, get that esophagus. Cut off all that excess. There's a bunch of fat in here. There's the crop. It's really stuck in that fat. Maybe we can come back to that later. What I need to do now is get in there and try to pull all those guts out. Lots and lots of fat. Wow. It's a fatty bird. Once again, I'm removing any of the connective tissue that holds the organs in place. I like to hook my finger like that everywhere I can, and I'm trying to find any of that. I don't know if it's tendon or tissue. It's definitely organs connecting. But the goal is to not break the stomach contents open. So you can see here, there's all the guts. I'll let those dangle down. Doesn't look like I nicked anything. That's good. Wow, this is the greasiest bird I've seen. Get some extra feathers off this wing. We're not marketing this, so I'm not making sure it's 100% feather free before we bring it onto this table. I've eaten and purchased birds that still had a few of those little feathers left, and I don't mind it. But what I do mind is all this fat. This is crazy. I don't know if the fat would make the bird taste any different, but it's certainly in my way right now. All right, got some of that fat off. So now I can reach in, look for that heart. When I say look, I mean I'm feeling with my hands, but it's a pretty fatty heart. There it is. A lot of these organs could traditionally be salvaged and maybe dehydrated to use as dog treats. But our dog Maria is allergic to chicken, so we don't actually have any use for it. I was able to pull out that esophagus from the back this time. Now for the vent. The vent is right there. No poop. Vertical incision. Both sides. And then remove the whole thing. Everything is very easy with the scissors. Pretty fatty bird, but as you can see, the cavity is empty. I'm going to give this a good hose down after I remove the neck. I'm having trouble getting a grip because of how fatty this bird is. We don't have to remove the neck. There we go. Feathers back here. Get him if I can. Out to the hose. So we're using this big cooler as our primary refrigeration source until we're done dispatching all of these birds and packaging them. Instead of sanitizing this and putting the packaged chickens back in here, I have another more efficient cooler over there, and it's only going to be in there momentarily, moving from this property to our new apartment building where we actually have multiple refrigerators and freezers empty available because the tenants haven't moved in yet. And from everything we've read, we should be refrigerating these for probably 1 to 2 days before freezing them. That allows the rigor mortis to set in. An alternative is to just put all of this straight into the freezer, but then you have to use that rigor mortis period after you thaw it. And we usually make sure all of our stuff is properly thawed before we eat it anyway, give it like an extra day after it feels done, but you really have to be conscious of that or else you're going to have tough meat. All of that is just based on what I've read online. We'll just have to see how this method goes. But right now, I need to get some of those chicken feet and the organs that are over on the prep table behind the camera, put them in here.
We're just placing the chicken feet straight in there because they were decently washed from the plucking machine, but the hearts go into this little capsule that used to contain salad. I think I've sufficiently explained the gutting process and the removal of the feet, so now we're just going to go through a quick time lapse of me doing these next 2 birds. After you do 2 or 3 of them, you really start to lock into the process and get things done a lot quicker and more efficiently. So you've seen close-ups of most of the setup, but here's a close-up now of our scalding pot. Like I said before, this is a large stainless steel pot. This is a 3-burner stove that has legs, but we have the legs folded up so it can sit low. That way we don't have to lift these heavy birds very high. And it's actually working perfectly because I have them elevated off the ground with a wooden pallet. I started with a plastic pallet, but Angie suggested that the wood would be probably less likely to melt under the heat.
Well, it's 5 o'clock. We have 3 birds left to dispatch, process, and then put in the cooler. But that's only the first part of the process, because then we have to make sure everything's ready for the shrink wrap bags. And these are freezer bags that constrict when you put them in warm water. And we're going to zip tie those shut once all the air, or as much air as possible, gets removed. And then we have to go transport these to the refrigerator for a day or two before we freeze them. So we're going to try to knock this out real quick before dinner. We might not get to the packaging part, but we at least need to get these birds dispatched. So that's what we're going to do now.
Our son Cedar is inside watching a movie, and that's kind of the only way we can distract him long enough so he can stay out of our way. But Angie does have to continuously go and check on him while we're doing this. But for now, it's one of the rare occasions where we can both work on the butchering at the same time, because we're just trying to knock this out as quick as possible. And if I create too much of a backlog of dispatched birds, then they're really just going to be sitting around, and I don't really want them to sit around longer than they need to. They'll stay in the kill cone just as long as it takes to drain the blood. Then they get plucked, and then they immediately get gutted. At the most, we'll have one backup bird dispatched and ready to go, and that's what happened here. So that's why I'm jumping out onto this table with Angie. We're just kind of trading tools back and forth and trying to get these two birds gutted. As you can see, they're similar sizes. We had already knocked out the roosters from the egg flock earlier. These are just some of the last few meat birds. And the roosters were all pretty much uniform size, and so were the hens. But there was a pretty significant difference in size between the hens and the roosters. But without having a scale this year, I can't really tell you the exact carcass weight of these birds. And now, let's finish this up with the last meat bird. So until we got to this last bird, I was simply stepping over that 2x4 into the chicken tractor and just grabbing whatever bird I can get. But now that we were down to the last bird, he was very skittish. He didn't have any friends to seek shelter with, so it was very difficult to actually chase him around and catch him. I basically had to corral him into a corner and then grab him by the leg. But now that we have him, I'm trying to relax him a bit, talk to him, finally make the first incision and drain the blood. And it's working very well, very clean cut. The blood is pumping as I would expect. The heart is pumping the blood out, so it's not really using gravity to drain as much as it is using the heart. But once that blood starts to stop dripping, the convulsions begin. It's a very normal part of the process. It's just the brain, I guess, reacting to the lack of blood. You could do your own research on that. I'm not an expert in this process. I'm just showing you our first impressions and our first experiences doing this on our property. So just for the sake of time, I'm trying to go ahead and finish removing the head before the convulsion's finished, which isn't really a good idea if you're not experienced. But after doing so many birds today, I'm feeling comfortable finishing up these cuts and kind of timing the last convulsion. And after the bird's head is removed, once again, it's time for the scalding and the plucking, which you've seen several times by now. I'm doing 3 to 4 second dunks at a time, probably bobbing it up once each second, trying to get the water into all the little folds of the skin so the feathers loosen up. And then I simply throw the bird into the plucker, hit that big button, and let it go. I should clarify, however, that we've never tried this with multiple birds in it. The reason why we didn't is because we only have one kill cone, so we only ever have one bird ready to go in here at a time. Maybe in the future, if we scale up our operation, we can try to have multiple birds draining at the same time and then pluck 2 at a time. Moving it over to the butchering table, I am removing the legs. One thing I haven't mentioned before was the gland on the tail. That just requires a quick incision down to the bone, and then you kind of scoop it out. It kind of has like some yellowness to it. You should go online and look up how to remove that gland, because I don't think that's even something I learned at the workshop. I don't know if it's necessary to remove, and I don't think I've honestly noticed it removed in any sort of grocery store meat birds. It's possible it is, it's just not something I know about, so yeah, do your own research on that. This is just how we're doing it now. I actually forgot to remove that gland on a few birds, so I don't even remember if it's in any footage that I've shown a close-up of so far. But anyway, you can see I'm doing all the usual stuff, doing an incision on both sides. The top of the bird, I'm trying to loosen up the neck and the trachea. On the other side of the bird, I'm trying to reach in and loosen up and remove all the organs. And then the final step of our butchering process, which may or may not be necessary, is to remove the heart and the neck and set those aside for broth. Once all that stuff's been removed, bring it down to the hose. Sorry about this camera angle, but I'm really just spraying it out, making sure there's no blood or anything left of the guts inside. And now that all the birds are in the cooler, I feel the need to get all the feathers out of the plucker before it dries. Feathers are all different shapes and sizes, and it's kind of like human hair, where once they dry up wrapped around stuff, it kind of feels just like stuck onto the surface. And unless I really want to get some cleaning detergent out and some scrub brushes, I think rinsing it all out first is the best idea. We can sterilize and sanitize everything later. And to finish off the rinsing process, I'm going to disassemble this top drum element of the Yardbird chicken plucker. The first step in that is to remove the hose splitter and that secondary hose that we have for cleaning the carcasses. That way there's no added strain on this drum while I take the brackets off. I don't want it flipping over without me being ready. There's 4 little buckle clips with a small carabiner that I removed, and that's the only way to really get in here with the hose to get the rest of the feathers out, because the top has this little shroud that prevents you from really getting a good angle with the hose and seeing what's all down the sides. But by flipping it over like this, I can really get in there, shoot the feathers from a different direction, and reach in and grab the stragglers by hand. You can see I'm paying extra attention to where those rubberized or silicone fingers attach themselves to the metal drum. That's where the little hair-like feathers really tend to wrap around and get stuck. And the hose can't really get them out when they're stuck like that. So I'm loosening them up with my fingers, and then I'm going back numerous times with the hose just to get all the stragglers. Once I've sufficiently removed the feathers from that top drum area, it's time to move on to the rotating base. This one has a lot of those silicone or rubberized fingers, and it's a lot harder to get my fingers in there because of how close they are to one another. But as you can see, I basically have to unwind a feather from every single one. It's very tedious. I don't know if there's any easier way to do this. Maybe if I hooked up a pressure washer and had that high PSI blast available, they would come right off. I don't know if that would damage the fingers, though. Another concern I have is that this is an electrical appliance, and there's an electric motor right there a few inches from the hose. I'm assuming the engineers accounted for this and designed a waterproof housing for their electric motor. Hopefully this works next time. I haven't actually fired it up since putting it away to know if there's any issues. But anyway, now that the feathers have been sufficiently cleaned off of the Yardbird Plucker, I'm going to move it out of this area to dry. I also moved the basket of feathers out of the way to be dumped later. And I'm going to try to make sure there's no splatter and stuff up on the legs, just so it doesn't dry with a bunch of crap all over it. You can see I found a few little stragglers of feathers now that I'm looking at the plucker from a different angle, so I'm just blasting all that off real quick. And then we're finally going to be done with this plucker, and now we can move on to the next steps.
I just took a break for dinner. Sat down for about 30 minutes. That's the first time I've sat since lunch. My body feels destroyed. This is like the hardest day of work. I have a stubbed thumb. It's really burning. My knees hurt, my back hurts, but we're not done yet. I don't need to get everything cleaned today, but I at least need to get the equipment cleaned that we need to use to package these birds. We have a cooler here, full to the top of chickens and chicken parts. Angie had to run to the store and get some ice because the ice we produced by ourselves in our own freezer was not enough. So that stuff is sufficiently chilled. We have some more ice in there, but that is a sanitary cooler that we're only going to use to transport the packaged chickens. And I need to get the stainless steel pot cleaned bleached, rinsed, scrubbed, all that, so we can use the heat shrink bags. So I don't want to waste too much more time explaining everything. I'm just going to show you what we're up to. So after rinsing the things that we need for packaging, I'm then going through with our diluted bleach detergent that we made ourselves to spray out and wipe down the stainless steel pot and some of the other equipment we need, such as the table. Like I said before, we don't really need to clean everything, but I'm just trying to knock out as much as I can while I'm waiting for that stainless steel pot to fill back up. All right, as you can see, I'm done with the tent. I have my hands-free system in my ears in hopes that you can hear me over this like jet engine sound of gas burning, trying to get clean cold water up to 185 degrees. We have these freezer bags here, which are designed to shrink when they're immersed in hot water of that certain temperature that I just mentioned. We have a straw that we will keep down in the cavity of the bird to allow air to escape. And then after the 5-second dunk, pull this out, finish off the zip tie, and then set it aside. But here's the instructions. And it says rinse and pat dry the chicken, and then do all that stuff I just mentioned. But the hot water has to be 180 to 195 degrees. So this is going to be a lot hotter than the 148 degrees, which I read was the optimal temperature for scalding chicken. It's at 163 degrees so far, so we're getting close. Anyway, then we remove the bag from the water, wait 10 seconds, allow the bag to shrink around the chicken, and after 10 more seconds, pull that straw out, finish off the zip tie, dry the bag, trim off the excess, and store your poultry in the freezer. That's what it says, but realistically, based on all the research I've done, we should refrigerate poultry for a day or two before it goes into the freezer. So, once that hits temperature, I'm going to start packaging the birds. We'll see how it goes. This process was a lot more time consuming than I expected, and I really wish we can figure out a way to streamline this. One thing that might make it easier is if we make an incision in the neck after we got the bird and then tuck the legs into it, because some of these birds' legs were sticking out way too far, making it very difficult to bag. Another thing is that the instructions say we should dry off the bird. Well, if the birds are wet from the cooler, our table's going to be wet. So we went through an entire roll of paper towels just for these few birds that we did today. Pretty wasteful, but it's the only thing I could think of to obey the instructions. So now here's a bit of a close-up now that the time lapse is over. You can see I'm putting the chicken into the bag based on what the instructions say, which is head or neck side down. And then I'm going to put this straw in the cavity, kind of twist the bag around it, and try to apply this zip tie without accidentally pulling the straw out, which I've done a couple times. Because if the straw is bottomed out into the cavity of the bird, no air can actually come out of it. So you have to pull it up just a little bit. But if you have too much resistance because that zip tie is too tight, you might really struggle to pull that straw, and then with all your might, you'll pull the straw all the way out, wasting a zip tie because you won't be able to get it back in. So we had a couple wasted zip ties, and I think we maybe only wasted one bag, which is nice. I didn't get a massive pack of these because I wasn't sure if they'd even be the right size. One bird was actually a bit too big for the bag, but I made it fit by really forcing it in. I figured if these bags are designed to be flexible enough to shrink, they should be flexible enough to stretch. Let me know in the comments if you have any tips or tricks regarding the packaging of the bird for us. But here's a close-up of a fully packaged bird with the zip tie tightened. I'm almost done editing this video so I can have this published for tomorrow morning. This takes a lot of time and effort, especially a video this length. I hope this video didn't get pulled due to a breach in the terms of service. I did my best to blur out just the kill cut of the bird, and I tried to leave as much possible for you guys to see. We have our chickens spread out through 3 different freezers, some on this property, some on our other property, and can't really get a good shot of all of them together, but here's a quick shot of what some of these frozen birds looks like. Looks like we have a delivery truck coming up the driveway, so I need to get going. But anyway, keep an eye out for the third video in the series. We're really going to reflect on the process, explain the mistakes we made, what we can potentially improve on next time. And as always, we're looking for feedback for people that have done this before, or if you have questions because you want to do this yourself, let us know down in the comments below. And we look forward to seeing you back here next time on Kind Heart Homestead. Thanks for watching.